FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
That is Eric Trump talking about the Brexit situation. And here's an interesting story that just came out on the Daily Mail overseas. You know the problem we're having on the southern border with people like flowing across because of that big bright orange neon welcome sign that we have flashing down there right now. There's now a concern about a surge in illegal immigrants trying to enter the country from France because they see the end of this open border situation in the EU coming. So now they're going to generate additional migrant pressure because of the vote that was all about immigration in the first place, largely. So that's there are more and more parallels developing on this Brexit situation to what's going on here in the United States, and maybe that frustration that people are feeling here that we see in this Brexit vote, and it's easy to see the comparison between the two. That's for sure. We're honored to be joined in the studio right now by Sarah Huckabee, a daughter of former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, and of course former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee. How are you? Good. Whoops! I'm sorry. It's good to see you. You of course, you were your father's campaign manager for his presidential campaign.
Yes, sir. They were hard up for help at that point.
Now listen to you.
They were nice enough to let me hang around.
Oh wow! So you've stepped away, obviously, from that when your dad dropped out of the race. And are you working for the Trump campaign now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And also for John Brunner's campaign here in Missouri.
Right. So let me address the presidential race first. What's your role with them, and how's that gone so far? How did you get involved?
I'm a senior advisor for the campaign, and I got involved after obviously my dad got out of the race and saw that there was a real need for drastic change in our country. And I thought that Donald Trump offered that. He's certainly shown himself to be quite the disruptor. And I think that's exactly what we need in Washington. I think it's exactly what we need here in Missouri. And that's one of the reasons that I'm supporting John Brunner and helping on his campaign as well. You've got two guys with a background in business, complete political outsiders that are going into the political climate, shaking things up, and have the ability to make drastic change. They're not beholden to special interests. And that was one of the big appeals for me on both of those candidates.
When I see all the polls leading up to this Brexit vote, that it was not going to pass. It was not going to pass. They didn't think there's any way this was going to happen. I think the odds makers had it at 8-1 against not passing, and then it passed. As somebody who's advising the Trump campaign, did they see that kind of silent undercurrent in this country? Because it's not right now, it's obviously not reflecting well in the polls for him, the most recent polls, but I have to wonder if there aren't people that are going to vote for him and just aren't saying, yes, I'm going to vote for him.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. I definitely think that's a big factor, not only in this race, but I think we saw it a lot in the primaries. Everybody saw that or said he would never make it out of the summer, never become the nominee, never get the votes. And he certainly has proven that. And I think that's in large part because this establishment and the Washington class has refused to listen to the people. I think that's one of the reasons he's doing so well, is because they haven't listened. They've ignored the collective voice of most of America. And I think that's been a big problem this cycle. I think it was a problem in England, and one of the reasons they all got it wrong.
Right. So let me ask this, because I was having this conversation with my daughter the other day, who's 21 and who I think I've raised a pretty good conservative there. But she's uncomfortable with Donald Trump as a candidate. And she said, I told her that I was going to get a sign and put it in my front yard. And she said, Dad, you can't do that. She said, we all know that we're going to go vote for him, but we don't want anybody to know it. And I understand where she's coming from on that. That's not generally the attitude you want to have among your voters. Does that concern the Trump camp at all?
Not at the end of the day, and partly because exactly what you said, she's still going to vote for him. I think what people know, they may have a little discomfort with Trump, but what they absolutely know without fail is that they have no capacity to vote for Hillary Clinton. I grew up in Arkansas. I lived under the Clinton machine. My dad fought against it his entire political career, and I can assure you and all of the country, nobody wants to see that expand or grow from where it is right now. And I think most Americans know that, and that's why Donald Trump is doing well in states that Republicans traditionally don't do well, and has the potential to win a lot of those states that Republicans haven't won in quite a few cycles.
Yeah, we're talking to Sarah Huckabee right now, who's an advisor on the senior advisor on the Trump campaign, and she's here as well speaking today for John Brunner. I've had John in the studio on a couple of occasions, had a chance to meet him. He is to a great extent like Trump, as you mentioned, from the standpoint that he's an outsider, although he told me he didn't want to run with just the outsider slogan because that's not how he views himself. He also doesn't view himself as someone who needs a job.
Right.
It's a job he wants to do to try to help the state. That's what he's told me.
Yeah, I mean, I think in large part, a lot of people in politics run because they need something to do, and that's absolutely the opposite with John Brunner. He doesn't need this job, but the job needs him. Missouri's been in a rough spot for the last several years under a bad administration, and they need somebody that can come in that isn't a wholly owned subsidiary to the donor class that can actually shake things up, and he is the only guy in the race that's uniquely qualified to do that. A lot of politicians will campaign that they're going to fight for you, but when they get in office, they're so indebted by the donor class, they can't actually do that. And he's the only guy in the race that can and will be able to fight for Missouri. And that's why not only I'm supporting him, but the latest polling has him in first, and looks like the rest of Missouri is getting on board too.
There you go. Is that what motivated? Now, your connection to the Brunner campaign is separate from your role in the Trump campaign, correct?
Yes.
So you were motivated personally to come here and campaign for John?
Yes, absolutely. I've gotten the chance to know John over the past several months, followed his campaign. It's obviously one of the top races in the country. And I saw when my dad was governor the amount of impact that a good governor can have on a state. And if you can't make things happen in Washington, which we've seen for the last several years, there's quite a gridlock there, then you have to rely on the states. And that's what's really important, that we go out and support good candidates for governor. And I don't think there's anybody in the country that would make a better governor and be better for Missouri than John Brunner.
I should probably know the answer to this, but has your father endorsed Donald Trump?
He has.
He has endorsed him. So he's on board with the campaign and doing whatever he can.
He is, like all the other Republican primary candidates, they took a pledge to support the nominee, and Donald Trump is the nominee, and my dad has followed through on that pledge and has actually called on all of the rest of the candidates that participated in the primary to do the same thing.
Well, what sense of frustration is there on your part or on the part of the Trump folks when you've got people, I think I read today where Mia Love doesn't intend to go to the convention, and there are other people who are saying they haven't decided if they'll go, or they still haven't decided if they're going to endorse. To me, this is as clear as night and day when you look at Hillary Clinton on one hand or Donald Trump on the other.
I think the frustration probably lies more with the American people than with the Trump campaign. They should be the ones screaming out, you guys need to get on board, because if you don't and Donald Trump loses and it's your fault, then you'll be responsible for us having Hillary Clinton. And we're talking about a generational impact that this next election has based on just the Supreme Court alone. Take away all the other hundreds of thousands of decisions the next president will make, and you just focus on that one thing. We're looking at 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 Supreme Court appointees, and I certainly don't want Hillary Clinton to get one, much less anything else.
Sarah Huckabee is our guest, and I know you didn't come here just to talk about Trump, but I have to ask this question since you're a senior advisor on the campaign. Where does your strength lie in advising this campaign? Is it at the grassroots level of bringing people out to vote in some of these important battleground states? Because the impression is nationally that Trump doesn't have much game when it comes to that, doesn't really understand what it's all about, and that these Clinton people are pouring tons of money into their ground game, and they're going to be way ahead of the game come November.
You know, they said that about the other 16 candidates in the Republican primary, and he beat all of them. So I would never underestimate him or the ground game or the operation that he has in place. He's shown that he can do a lot more with a little, and I think, frankly, we need a lot more of that in government. Being able to expand those resources and do a lot more with them than we've seen in the past.
Yeah. Well, I had to mention this story because I saw it come out on CNN today. They're forcing your dad to reimburse the band Survivor for using the song "Eye of the Tiger" at his campaign events. Now, you were his campaign manager. Is he going to make you pay that?
I hope not.
$25,000, and apparently they've gone after other candidates too.
Yeah, and it was actually just for one event, one moment, and a staffer played that song. But because it's I guess, ongoing legal battle, I can't get into a lot of detail. But yeah, it's a pretty rough ride.
I just think that's a bummer. I think these artists ought to shut up and sing, to quote the Laura Ingraham book that time.
Just so everybody knows, that was his comment and not
my
mine.
comment, not Sarah Huckabee's comment. That's what they need to do. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for giving us some time today. And hopefully we'll see you again before November.
I hope so. Thanks so much for having me on.
Very good. Thank you. Sarah Huckabee, who's here on behalf not only of the Trump folks, but John Brunner, who's running for governor. And there was a poll, the last poll that I saw out, that shows him with the lead in that race. And there have been a number of forums so far and a number of debates. In fact, I hosted one of the forums that we held here in Missouri, and people are starting to narrow down their choices, and there's a lot of advertising running, both positive and negative, around the state, and those are all things we can talk about at 314-969-9797. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk to Senator Will Kraus about this Senate Bill 656, which would basically allow you to conceal carry without a permit in the state of Missouri. And also, we're going to talk to Josh Hawley, who's running for Attorney General, who's got a lot of experience arguing in front of the Supreme Court. I want to pick his brain, the brain of Professor Hawley, on that a little bit as well, with those Supreme Court decisions the last couple of days. More of the Marc Cox Show still to come. Stick around.